So hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this Skype interview that I'm doing with a friend of mine, Nick Kemp. I've known Nick for quite some time through our Facebook connections, etc. If you've seen any of our interactions, then you know that we're both big music fans and
obsessive, borderline obsessive,
and big hi-fi fans, and most definitely obsessive with regard to that. If we just look at our bank balances. But what I want to talk to Nick about today is this very exciting training that we've got coming up in the Performance Partnership later this year, which is Provocative Change Works, which Nick is actually the creator of. So welcome to the chat, Nick. It's great to see you this morning.
Yeah, great to finally meet you outside just texting on Facebook as well.
Yeah, absolutely, brilliant fun. So obviously, for a lot of our people, Nick, you'll be quite new. So I wonder if you just tell us a little bit, share with us a little bit about your history of NLP and therapy, and and the other kind of things that you've done in the past that bring you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, my background was originally, interestingly enough, in twofold: personal development and also business. I've been involved in sort of like a whole bunch of meditation type stuff going way back to when I was back in 1979, which, is way back in the day,
right.
When, if you were a vegetarian, it was almost an insult. And I did a lot of personal development stuff and looked at a lot of that area from 70s, 80s, and came across NLP in the 90s, and really didn't know anything about it. And the best advice I was given was go to a training and experience it.
Right.
So I did a lot of training back in the late 90s with Richard Bandler, and then attended and assisted on a whole bunch of courses for probably 6, maybe 7 years. So I'd gone through the material over and over and over and over again, read everything I could read, bought everything I could get, lamented the lack of hi-fi quality on a lot of the audio products, remastered them in my own studio,
Yeah.
but was really fascinated by how they'd taken and modeled some core therapists from way back in the day and developed this approach that was obviously, to me, hugely useful. Now, this time I was in business, I worked in the recruitment sector,
Okay.
and from sort of mid-80s to around late 90s, was involved in 2 startup companies, and both became multi-million-pound businesses. So I was used to working at the sharp end of
Right.
show me the results,
Yeah.
never mind all this flaky stuff, show me the results. So I started to incorporate NLP in a business context, and from around 2004 to 2008, actually taught NLP training courses as well, before I moved on to developing the PCW model, which of course came from the landmark meeting with Frank Farrell in 2004, where the world changed. It was like going through Alice in Wonderland through the rabbit hole, where you think to yourself, Jesus Christ, what's going to happen next? So thumbnail sketch, personal development, business, and then it all turned really completely around in 2004.
Right, because that's obviously a particular thing I'd like us to talk about. So I think it's very exciting. I've been recommending provocative therapy by Frank Farrell since I started training in 1993.
Wow.
Never unfortunately got the chance to work with him personally or meet him personally. But you did, as you just mentioned there,
Yeah.
which must have been really amazing. And you say it was a real quantum shift, kind of like time for you.
Yeah.
So you could tell us a little bit about what that was like and what you got out of that.
Sure. Well, firstly, I have to thank Richard Bandler for mentioning Frank Farrell, because in 2003 I was helping out on a Master Prac course in London, and Bandler said, well, if you think I'm crazy, you should meet this guy, Frank Farrell. And 120 students all leaned forward and wrote down Frank Farrell.
Yeah.
Then a few months later, I got an email from my dear friend and colleague, Andrew T. Austin, that simply said he's alive and coming to the UK. And I thought, what the hell is he talking about? And it was Frank Farrell. He was coming to do a workshop in Bournemouth in 2004. In fact, we booked 8 months ahead to get on this course, thinking there's going to be thousands of people on this training. We're not going to be able to move. If we get to glimpse him from afar, being such a well-established therapist, we'll do great. So we turn up on this seaside town in Parkstone down in Bournemouth. There's 17 people in this workshop.
Right.
Worst advertised event probably I've ever seen, you know.
Right.
But equally split between NLP trainers and fervent feminist social workers.
Oh wow, what a combination!
So you have this digital split within the group, and for the 4 days, the next 4 days, I was literally completely confused, amazed, exhilarated, whole range of emotions, because I could see a lot of what I'd learned from NLP and in NLP being done in a different way, but I couldn't pigeonhole it into, I couldn't put it into Ericksonian model, I couldn't put it into the meta model. I recognized a lot of things, but to be honest, it was completely confusing, but fascinating at the same time. And so from there, I thought, I really need to know more about this, because the results that he's having, even with the demonstration subjects, are just extraordinary, you know. Very funny, very fast-paced, very different to what I'd experienced before, but could see some commonalities. So I immediately started to, you know, as a usual obsessive person that I am, want to know all the videos, all the audios, just bring everything in one great crate, and I'll start working my way through it. And was told by Frank, well, there's the book, yeah, and that's it, basically. So I started hosting Frank in 2005 in Leeds, and did so every year subsequently to that, as well as him coming to stay at my house usually for 3 to 4 weeks per year.
Brilliant.
Now Frank it's a bit like Erickson in that he's a complete one-off. Right. You know, the difference with Frank was he didn't really model anyone. He came up with his whole approach himself. And when he passed away a few years ago, I inherited the entire Frank Farrell archive, including his original book, which is this one here, right. First edition, Frank Farrell's own personal copy of Provocative Therapy. You'll never see this because it's in blue as opposed to the usual brown ones. And so we had an opportunity to talk for literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours about clients, business, applications in therapy, coaching, personal development. It was like having a personal audition with Milton Erickson, you know, one-on-one. Right. So we recorded a lot of this. We recorded all the workshops that we ever did. And after a period of time, I began to realize that in my own sort of communications, I was using a lot of Frank's stuff, but I wasn't using it in the typical classical PT way. And that's how PCW, or Provocative Change Works, began to develop. Probably around 2006 is where it started to really develop.
Right, because that leads nicely into the next question that I got for you, which is, you know, what led you to develop Provocative Change Works, and you know, and really your kind of interpretation as to what that actually is. Yeah,
good question. What happened was in 2006, up until that point, I had resisted vigorously seeing private clients. You know, I was doing business work, I was doing corporate work, I was teaching pracs, master pracs, personal development stuff, public speaking stuff, all the standard NLP stuff. But I really resisted seeing private clients. BBC Radio Leeds rang me up and asked me if I would go in and talk about NLP specifically, which I did. And during the conversation, I mentioned that, you know, I work with people who've got phobias and anxieties. As soon as I mentioned the word phobias, the production guy's eyes just lit up, you know, he's going, really? And he said, would you stay behind afterwards and talk to us about what it is that you do? And I went, sure. And then he said, would you work with people who would be our listeners if they phoned in? Because this is a real hot subject at the moment.
Right.
And I said, Yeah, providing they're not completely crazy, and we have some client notes ahead of time, and I thought it would be maybe 1 or 2 sessions on the radio. That would probably be it. It'd be a very nice bit of publicity. This went on for 26 weeks, every Wednesday afternoon, 2 to 3 o'clock. And we had every kind of possible phobia you could mention. You name it, we got it. The condition I did this was that they would give me a recording of all the sessions.
Okay.
When I was listening back to the sessions, I started to realize that Frank's influence had massively crept into what I was doing.
Right.
Because I didn't have a lot of time. So you literally would be, okay, here you go. You got an hour before you go on the air to 50,000 people. So I started to realize that what I was doing was not straight ahead NLP, and it was not straight ahead provocative therapy. There was a big difference in terms of the different elements that I would introduce. For example, in classic provocative therapy, it's mostly conversational. Mm-hmm. So the practitioner will adopt a series of stances to get the client to think differently. They don't necessarily believe in those stances, but they're playing the devil's advocate in the communication. In Provocative Change Works, we do all that, but we also do a lot of stuff around metaphors, elicitation of metaphors, challenging metaphors, and getting the client we're recording the session for the client to listen back. So in a timeline kind of way, as I'm talking to the client, it's being recorded with a view that they'll be listening back to it.
Okay.
And also elements of hypnosis as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm left with this dilemma that what do I call this stuff? And I decided to call it rather provocatively Provocative Change Works as a wonderful embedded suggestion for everybody who ever repeats it. And the first DVD came out in 2006, which was some sessions from a practitioner I was doing where I used some of the model and had Frank actually doing commentary on it because I just asked him if he would do it.
Yeah.
And he went, yeah, sure. So the only person on planet Earth who has narration and commentary by Frank on his own approach.
Amazing.
Which you couldn't make it up. Honestly, you could not make it up. So the PCW model developed from then, and then 2 or 3 years later when I was asked to teach in Japan, the Japanese host said, will you develop this into a practitioner course? And I thought, oh, God, here we go, the slippery slope, Jesus Christ. I'd rather chew my own arm off. And then I thought about it. I thought, no, calm down, think about it. What would you need to do to make it so that you cover all aspects of the model?
Right.
And I figured out that we need really 10 days in total. The first 3 days would be the introduction that we're going to do with yourselves, which is a good overview of everything. So it's like, here's the toolbox. Here are all the different ways that you can go. Here's a good taster to get you going with. That's the level 1 training. The level 2, which is 4 days, is much more using improvisation, a lot of the hypnosis elements, a lot of the time framing elements. So it's very much, okay, let's go to work. Let's see in action. So comparison would be like master NLP type training. Okay. We want to see what we can do with it. And then the level 3, which is 3 days, is show me what you can do time to the students. I know what I could do. Let's see what you can do. So not for the faint-hearted. Point,
Good.
If you're not prepared to demonstrate what you can do, don't bother coming to the level 3 training.
Good. We like that.
So it developed. So since then, I've run 3 practitioners in Japan. I've done 4 in Europe and 1, maybe 2 in the UK at the moment. But I'm already in like 13 countries.
Yeah,
and what's interesting is that, very similar to NLP, is that these tools are applicable across a wide range of different people and different demographics. Whether it's business, personal development, coaching, therapy, it covers a whole range of things. Youngest client ever was 8 years old. Oldest client, 88. So big range.
Brilliant. So you've mentioned NLP quite a bit there, and obviously that's what the Performance Partnership is known for, is for our NLP Training Institute. A lot of people watching and listening to this interview will be already trained in NLP. So, how do you find that NLP and Provocative Change Works fit together and work together?
Right. Well, the great thing about NLP is that if I hadn't studied NLP, there's no way in a million years I would have understood Frank's aspect of Provocative Change Works, of provocative therapy.
Right.
I, like many people, would just stand there in amazement thinking, what the hell is this? I don't know what to do with this. So the difference in NLP, the commonalities are that in Provocative Change Works, the practitioner adopts stances to get the client to affirm what's true for them and what's real for them. So an awareness of language is really useful. Awareness of metaphors is really useful because in PCW, everything is conversational.
Right.
So, for example, if I say, so David, well, what's that like for you? Is a big metaphor elicitation question.
Yep.
If I say, so, well, what's that like for you right now? It puts it in a time frame.
Yep.
If I say, well, what's that been like? Then it's kind of different.
Yep.
So the awareness of language from NLP and being able to use sensory-rich language is hugely useful in adopting the provocative stances. Frank used to do this wonderfully when he used to tell stories, which is very Ericksonian. Some of these were really graphic, and you'd have people in the audience thinking, oh my God, he's talking about serial killers in Wisconsin, which he worked with as well, of course.
Yeah.
In Dota Mental Hospital, he worked with people like Ed Gein. So this is not your sort of mild, I'd like to lose a few pounds on a weekend type client.
Yeah.
So a lot of the elements of provocative therapy in PCW will be recognized. Interrupting the client, challenging the client, generalizations, chunking up, chunking down, changing visual representations. All these things would be used, but used conversationally.
Right.
When I'm working, one of the ways of teaching this is we have 27 different icons that represent different stances that the client might adopt in relation the practitioner would adopt in terms of the client.
Right.
Including things like deliberately misunderstand the client.
Okay. Yeah.
Deliberately confuse the client. So the other aspect from an NLP point of view, if I was teaching a master prac group, we'll talk about how we're changing states and chaining states by using these different stances.
Okay.
So
Brilliant.
we're looking very much at the process of what's going on. Now, here's the end result, what the person's experiencing or what the group's experiencing, whether it's business, therapy, coaching. Here's the feeling and thinking elements that are creating and conspiring to create this. The belief that people have as to what's going to happen next is based upon their previous experience of what's occurred. So we're looking to provoke here some change of thinking, feeling that can be then translated in real terms. If it's business, in a definite business outcome. If it's therapy, it's a definite therapeutic outcome. In that kind of context. Right. So, my favorite example was working with, and I can mention her because she gave me a testimonial, Lucy Evans, who's a Commonwealth international athlete who I worked with last year, who got an all-time best time after 3 PCW sessions.
Brilliant.
Now, that's show me the money, show me the results time. Another guy I worked with who swam the channel, similarly, we were using the real precise elements of PCW to get his thinking changed so that the fluid states he could get into could be definitely sort of like sorted in what he was actually doing.
I mean, the conversational aspect of this sounds absolutely fantastic, Nick, because, obviously we have people coming and doing our NLP trainings that are interested in how to use this in formal therapy. But then we have sports coaches, you've already mentioned the application there, business coaches, business consultants, business trainers, all of those kind of things. So it sounds like what you've got here is a model or a structure or a strategy of being able to apply these conversational change techniques in any context whatsoever.
Yeah, that really is the idea, and What's interesting for me is after I'd done about 1,000 hours private work, I thought, yeah, okay, I'm getting a sense of how this can be used. From having taught and seen clients across sort of like Asia, USA, and Europe, and a big demographic, I now have got a very good idea of the typical patterns that tend to come up. So the difference in I'll give you a good example. In classic coaching and in NLP, mostly you're going to start with what you want as an opening question. And then from that point, you set up a grid as to what the client, what stops the client, what will happen if they get what they want, what resources do they need. You're setting up kind of a grid for where you tend to go.
Yep.
In PCW and provocative therapy, it's entirely different. We start off with, okay, so what's the problem? And then the practitioner continues to insist that the client does more of the same behavior that's the problem behavior.
Okay. Yep.
Which kind of throws a bit of a curveball because it puts the onus back onto the client to argue for the change.
Right.
So it's very sort of Aikido-esque.
Yep.
You know. So one of Frank's typical responses would be, so what's wrong with that?
Right.
And then the client would come back with increasing reasons as to why it is a problem. And in challenging the generalizations, what happens is essentially the client does a massive reframe and submodality shift in terms of having to think about things differently. Because the PCW practitioner can go in any direction at any time, interrupt, go faster, go slower, go off at a tangent, but they're always mindful of changing the generalizations of the client. Nothing is done just purely arbitrarily, and there's no reliance upon set techniques either. Right. So it's a bit like a musician. You know, you and I have a love of music, you know, so I'll be bringing some stuff with me as well, just to let you know. So the best musicians have the ability to improvise outside the normal songs and go into different ways. When I saw Dylan in '79 sort of doing a gig, he took a lot of his classic songs, but he completely changed them around. So that sort of flexibility and fluidity conversationally is at the heart of what we're actually doing. And also when people talk about provocative, it's done with a good intention and a sense of talking to an old friend. You know, It's not Jack Bauer torturing some Russian agent in 24. That's not what we're aiming for.
Right. Brilliant. So obviously a lot of people who'll be watching this will have already studied NLP. You know, there may be practitioners, master practitioners, maybe trainers of NLP. So what do you think somebody who'd already trained to a certain level in NLP would gain and benefit from learning your Provocative Change Works model?
It's a good question. This is the same conversation I had with Steve and Connie Ray in Boulder.
Right.
You know, I went over, they hosted me for 2 years over in Boulder, Colorado. And I remember turning up on the first day, and it was like the who's who of the West Coast. I thought, Jesus Christ, it's like everybody who's anybody there. Well, actually, this was in San Francisco before I went to Boulder. The thing that I think is useful, or the feedback I've had back from people, including Steve and Connie Ray, Richard Bolstad would be another example of someone, is that we're using a lot of the NLP skills, but we're using them in a much more conversational way than we would do normally.
Right.
So it's a bit like we've got all the musical notes and the chords, but we're starting to explore different sonic landscape.
Right.
So a lot of the groundwork's already done there in terms of the vocabulary and all the tools, but it allows for a much more improvised way of working.
Okay.
So a big factor in this is not going, yes, the techniques are really useful and there are some specific step-by-step stuff I do with PCW, but also it gives the ability for the practitioner to work in a much more improvised way.
Okay.
So
Brilliant.
Improvisation, certainly with the level 2 part of the training, is a big key element. So we're not. So what tends to happen is that it unleashes a lot of the creativity in people. So that's one of the reasons that people really like it. They have the discipline of the structure. They have an awareness of language, recognition of different language patterns, recognition of time references. They have all that, but they're suddenly able to really unleash in a more creative way.
Brilliant.
So it becomes more from their personality rather than emulating somebody else, which is been, with respect, criticism of one of my over the years, where there's another 10,000 Richard Bandlers appear or Ericssons, and we don't want any more of those.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so it's about developing, integrating, but the main thing is we're looking at the results. That's the key thing. Show me the evidence for demonstrable change.
Yeah.
Whether it's business or coaching or that's the proof of anything. Otherwise, we can all argue about the theory of it. Show me the evidence for the change. That's the key thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And we talked there about NLP quite a bit, and I'm presuming that people that might be watching this and thinking about doing the training that haven't yet studied NLP, that they would still be able to attend the Provocative Change Workshop and be able to get a huge amount out of it.
Yeah, and what's great is you have the people who've done the NLP side who bring that in and then come into learning about PCW. But you also have the other total counter position where people come in and they love what's happening with the PCW stuff. And I say, yeah, what you would really benefit from now is going back and learning about language and learning about sort of some modalities and state changes and state changing. So my recommendation is go back in and learn this particular bit.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that Bandler and Grinder modeled Frank and described him in Frogs into Princes as an excellent example of requisite variety.
Yeah.
And also the lesser known quote, which was never printed, was they said to him back in, I think it was 82 when Bandler hosted him, well, we see you as like the rocket scientist of the therapeutic field. You just have one problem. And Frank went, oh yeah, what's that? And he went, marketing.
Yes.
Because provocative therapy was probably the best kept secret on planet Earth. I mean, really, when I inherited Frank's archive a few years ago, his son, I said to his son said, well, how much of this stuff do you want me to ship? And I said, Tim, ship everything. And I got like 10 giant crates of tapes and audio and video going way back to the 1960s. And the shipping charge was 1,500 quid. So that gives you an example of how much stuff arrived. So the backbone to PCW through PT is very well road tested, very thorough, very comprehensive. And I've done myself about 7,500 hours of client sessions with PCW. So what I'm going to be teaching is extremely well road tested and very well refined.
Great. So, I mean, that leads nicely into the next question, which I'm sure people who are interested in attending it's a 3-day workshop, isn't it? That we're doing.
Sure. Yeah.
What will you actually be teaching in those 3 days, and what can the delegates expect to learn and be able to do afterwards?
Okay. The 3 days is a good overview. So what we'll be teaching the core elements of how to use provocation with clients. We'll be teaching sort of some specific things that I've found with certain client conditions in terms of problem solving, removing unhelpful anxiety type states that are not in standard NLP or in hypnosis. There'll be an opportunity for people to be demo subjects so they can get a one-on-one experience of what it's like to work, which is really, there's no other better way of learning it.
Yeah.
There'll be a huge amount of opportunity to ask questions about how to sequence these different stances. I'll be teaching basically the blueprint for how Frank did his stuff, which is really not taught.
Yeah.
And people will have lots of opportunity to do exercises and to practice. This is not a Nick standing at the front of the room, turn to page 32 in your manual, chalk and talk thing.
Yeah,
it'll be lively, interactive, thought-provoking, challenging, at times bewildering, at times inspiring 3 days. The idea is we're stimulating some different ways of thinking, feeling that are measurable in terms of success.
And also it sounds like there'll be a lot of, not only a lot of transformation and change, but a lot of fun and laughter and humor, I would imagine.
There is. I mean, the thing is, it's not about being comedic, but it's about appreciating that here we are on planet Earth, and sometimes the amount of seriousness that's put into a problem is unhelpful for the resolution of that thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, it's worth remembering that at the heart of all these different situations, whether it's business, coaching, therapy, personal development, fundamentally, all we're ever doing is bringing things together or pulling things apart.
Yep.
So the key thing with this is that change is not based on time. It's based upon how you switch around environments, how you change people's thinking, emotional states, and beliefs so that they're then empowered to be able to demonstrably notice and experience something else. You know, the proof is in the results. You know, this is where I throw the gauntlet down and say, business, therapy, I can show you examples of this, many, many different situations. But the key thing is that people are able to learn and use this for themselves. You know, I'm all for people can go away and start to develop and build their own experiences and come back and show new insights and new things.
Great, brilliant. Well, I'm certainly very excited about it. I've booked out the weekend, so I'm definitely going to be there because all of the things that you've spoken about so far, I'm going like, yep, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. So it's going to be very, very exciting. And I'm going to put on the bottom of this video the details of the dates and all of those kind of things so that people can book their places and be part of that as well.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank you, Nick, for spending the time with us and explaining more about this very new thing for the Performance Partnership. And I think it's going to be I believe it's going to be the first of many things that we can do together, which I find very exciting, very inspiring.
Well, I'm really enthused because what I like about from talking to you is you're interested in the results.
Yeah.
You're interested. What can we do with stuff? You know, around the world, there's millions of people all analyzing things at a submolecular level.
Yeah.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. But at the end of the day, this is whether it's a business, coaching, personal development situation, or somebody who just wants a better sense of well-being or success, confidence in their life. It's about how do you make that measurable transition?
Yeah.
And I'm hugely delighted and very grateful to those people who are interested in promoting that way of thinking.
Brilliant. Again, thanks for being with us, Nick. And I'm really looking forward to the event, and we're looking forward to a great crowd of very enthusiastic people there ready to make personal change themselves and learn massive amounts over the weekend.
Excellent. Good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.